October Equity Committee meeting. If you would please, let's have a look at the previous meeting minutes, and if you have any changes or corrections, let us know. And then I will turn it over to Dr. Chapman for the report. All right.
Microphone?
Oh.
Try it again.
I always forget. Jeez, how do I forget? Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2 October 2023 meeting of the Equity Committee. We had a look at the previous meeting minutes. If anyone has any corrections, let me know. Otherwise, we will move on to our Diversity Officer's report. Dr. Chapman.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. McKittrick. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to get right into equity training updates. We are fresh off of an instructional improvement day, which happened last Friday, September 29th. So our numbers to date as of September 29 is 611 APS staff persons trained since our opening start to training on August 9th. Yeah, so over the past 6-8 weeks of work, we've been able to touch 611 staff persons, and I did provide you with the legal size document just for your perusal when you have nothing else to do so that you can get a sense of the feedback that we are getting from our staff as it relates to the training that we've been providing over the past 6 to 8 weeks. And so you'll see some common themes. We track common themes from our feedback. Our feedback helps us to develop more training opportunities. It helps us to better engage with our staff as we continue throughout the year. And it becomes a very important piece in how we even support buildings as they continue to support their staff in growing in their culturally responsive practices. So more to come on that as we move through the year. I want to give a special shout out to our co-facilitators because I certainly can't be in 6 buildings at one time. So we had myself, Wilma Cohen-Alexander, Dr. Glover, Allison Strickland, Yvonne Culver, and Angela Carter, who also supported training on September 29th. And you all know those names and know that they represent different divisions throughout the district. So it's just nice to have a group of people who represent various offices out and about doing this work with us. So I wanted to give them a shout out. Any questions about the feedback? Anything popping out at you that you wonder about or have any questions about?
I like equity is a verb.
Yeah.
I just wanted to, I'm sorry, Val. I just wanted to point out, just how many feedbacks there were. I mean, that was impressive to me. So it's good to see that people are being, involved and giving us that feedback for sure. A lot of positives, obviously, on here also.
Yeah. And thank you to Sydney, who makes sure that those surveys get returned to us. It's all digital by QR code and email.
Yeah, I don't have a question, but to mirror the other comments, I am appreciating reading through this at not just the quantity of the comments, but the quality of the comments. There are so many comments here that are so thoughtful, and to me, that is reflective of they had a meaningful experience, that they took the time and energy to make so many thoughtful responses.
Yeah. Thank you for that. We do appreciate it. And we hear a lot that the opportunity to just be in conversation with your colleagues and others who have some knowledge in this field is appreciated. And we even saw that in our session in New York, just giving people time to talk and reflect and share. Because we know when we get to those perspectives, we grow and we learn. And so that's always the goal, is to help folks make workplace connections through the perspectives and insights that they're hearing from other people. The other thing I wanted to share about equity training is, as a result of Dr. Robinson's principal data review meetings, and I know you've been hearing about those, as a result of what I have heard from principals about needing more time with their staff to pay attention to core content and instructional delivery, we are making some new adjustments to our equity training content to be inclusive of core content and other needs in buildings. So in other words, our sessions are now starting to move toward the testing of how can we combine equity training with core content. So to give you an example, at Resnick, where I was on Friday, we combined Resnick's equity training with the IB learner profile. And so I worked with the IB coordinator at Resnick, and we co-created a session at Resnick so that they could get the time they needed to deepen their understanding of IB, but also see the connections to being culturally responsive and equitable in their practice. And it was phenomenal. It was phenomenal. So we're going to do more of that. Coming up, we're going to have a culturally responsive school leadership session for school counselors, and we'll be asking Ms. Whitfield and Stephanie Hammond to be a part of that, along with Yvonne Culver. We're going to be offering at Bookdo in November, and we're planning for that now with Dr. Halassa, equity and culturally responsive science instruction. So we're adapting to what principals are telling us in the data review about needing more content area time. We don't want to get rid of equity training. We want to say we are connected to core content. Culturally responsive practice is a thread that runs through every core content area. So just thinking more intentionally in our work about how we can better support schools on Instructional Improvement Day. Want to also share that November 15th, and we're going to provide updates for you at Monday's board meeting, but on November 15th, a team of us will be at the Educational Service Center of Northeast Ohio, delivering equity training for staff persons who are employed by districts throughout their membership schools. And so we do that a few times a year. Sometimes weather plays a part and they get canceled, or less attendance numbers might result in a cancellation. But we've been doing that for the past 8 years, at least 2 to 3 sessions per year. So we're excited to get back on the calendar there. And want to also let you know that our team, the 4 of us that do this work, Mrs. Whitfield around Scholar Voice, Dr. Glover, and myself, as well as Wilma Cohen-Alexander, we're in the midst of a book study right now. And this is a presenter that we had the pleasure of seeing and being in a session with in New York City at the RESI conference. So there was such key takeaways from Dr. Goldie Muhammad on the idea of unearthing joy through culturally responsive teaching in schools, that we thought, well, let's learn as much as we can so we can incorporate that learning into our work. So we are doing that. Anything else to add on that, Dreama?
I love the book, and I learned a lot from the book, and I love the book, and Unlimited Joy, I've incorporated, or it will be incorporated into some of the things that all of us are going to be doing with our student board members,
Yeah.
which includes music and art and some mindfulness activities. So all of those things will always be incorporated when we work with our scholars.
Wanted to give you an update on the Chief Diversity Officer performance goals for this coming year. I had a chance to meet with Superintendent Robinson to discuss the goals for my work individually as well as leading the work in the district. One of the important goals, I think, for us to work together on is to ensure that all APS divisions have established at least one equity goal that connects to one of the 4 cornerstones that we'll be bringing forward in our strategic plan. But we want for every division within the district to have an equity goal that connects to either academic achievement, family, partner, and community engagement, culture of safety and belonging, and operational excellence, because we don't want to forget that side of the house as well. So I'll be working with Dr. Robinson on establishing those goals with the representatives and leaders of those divisions. We want to be sure that their goals are culturally responsive, right, and equitable and inclusive. So looking forward to that. A second goal is to recreate the equity data dashboard. We formerly had, and I know Mrs. McKittrick, you may recall that 2 or so years ago, we had an equity data dashboard. And it helped us to monitor key metrics that we wanted to look at as we do our work. When we moved to a new data system from Tableau to Unified Insights, we lost our equity data dashboard. And so now that we've implemented the new data system as of last spring, it is time to bring back what we were using as a tool to establish key metrics in our work. So that's my second goal, is to work in collaboration with our data team as well as our technology division to bring that equity data dashboard back into play for our use. And there are a whole set of action steps and evidence indicators around each of these goals. And then the third one I already kind of shared with you is the embedded PD and adult learning that integrates core content and culturally responsive, relevant practices toward employee growth. And so kind of shared that when I talked about the Resnick IB and the science and equity training and the counselor practices and equity training. So those are the 3 goals that I'm going to be working toward personally and as the lead in the division of DEI. And that is all, unless you have questions for me.
Anybody have questions?
Nope.
I have a question. I actually have a comment. I was listening, but I was perusing this stuff, and largely positive. It looks like largely everybody gained new perspectives about diversity, equity, inclusion. So those aren't the folks I'm concerned about. There were a few no's, and I'm always just interested, in what's behind those no's. And unfortunately, some of it is some of that same stuff that you hear sometimes that's inaccurate. Well, they say, well, life is not equal. Was one of the comments, which is, they didn't gain any perspective. Life is not equal. Or just that they didn't feel like they had anything that they gained. I just find that so terribly hard to believe from educators. Mm-hmm. That really shocks me. And so, I don't know, how you dig into that and like address it, like moving forward. You know, can you touch those people in any way? Someone said, "Oh, we're doing fine over here." Not according to what I heard at the community discussion last Friday. And those are all Firestone students that I listened to. They were wonderful. You know, sometimes it's a little hard to hear from our own babies because they told it like it was. I appreciate it, and I thank you, Dreama, for making sure those scholar voices were there. I think it was so important. So I just wanted to say that out loud because that's just the truth. You know, not everybody is interested and wants to receive this, you know, to be the best possible version of themselves. And I just think that's unfortunate in a district that's an educational entity, but it doesn't take away from your hard work and the team's hard work. So I just want to say that out loud.
Thank you for that, Mrs. Autry, and we are thinking about it. One of the things we don't do is collect email addresses, so we don't tie it back to the person, but what we are doing is looking at responses, and we just had this discussion today. So as we look at responses, look at what people have said they want to know more about, our next work is to push that information back out to principals. So even with our surveys, pushing, because we know which building, so we can take our survey data and individually share that information with principals in the hopes that they know their staff best and probably know who said that or who isn't receiving information in the best way so that they can continue to cultivate, to coach, to lead, to instruct, and support where required. So I wouldn't necessarily know who, but they do. They certainly would know, because it would also show up in the culture of your classroom, right? In the way that you interact with young people. It shows up. And so we just had that discussion today with myself and Larry Johnson, one of the principal supervisors. And so Sydney got another task to do after that discussion, but it had to do with pushing information from surveys and from the responses. There's a part of our equity training where at the very end we're asking staff, what do you want to know more about as it relates to this culturally responsive framework that we're talking about? And they have a list of things that they can choose from, and how we push that back out to principals to say, yeah, even at a school that operates in the IB profile, there were a number of things that people wanted to still know more about. So that whole idea that even though, right, I'm pushing this rigorous instructional delivery program, there are still things I want to know. So we've got to be sure we're supporting principals in continuing to engage their staff. But thank you for that. Yep.
Anybody else?
So I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Whitfield. She's going to give you some updates on our scholar voice and equity work.
So what I have been working on since the last time we saw each other is just interviewing students for leadership roles. I've interviewed over 100 students, so we're adding new board members because we had some who graduated, and then we're adding others because we want to make sure every school is represented. Dr. Robinson, he will also have a leadership team, and also the presentation that you all heard at the last board meeting, the mayor's leadership team. So 20 students will be with his leadership team, about 18, between 18 and 20 will be with his leadership team. We will have 10 elected school board members, and then the rest will go to the mayor's leadership team. As a part of their interview, they did an informal survey, and basically the results of the survey match our Transcend data, and that's coming around, and you all can take a look at it in terms of connection to the community and the schools. And the number one response from students on the informal survey was that they wanted to have more relationships inside of the school and in the community. They want more relationships with their teachers, and they also want more relationships with their peers. So you all can take a look at that data, and if you have any questions, I'm available to ask. As well, we have collected so much data, and what we want to do is begin to take action. So I gave you all a packet, and it has some of the activities that the students have been engaged in so far this school year that we're hoping will make them feel more connected. The students told me that when they feel more connected to their teachers in schools, they tend to come to school more. When they feel more connected, they feel like they engage with their schoolwork more. So it's just all a holistic picture. We start engaging our students, giving them agency on what they're learning, giving them a voice. Then we start to see our attendance improve. We see our attendance improve. We see our grades and our test scores and those types of things come up. So if you have any questions, I'm here to answer those for you.
I just wanted to follow up. Did you say over 100 students interviewed for the scholar leadership roles?
Yes, we had over 100 students that have been interviewed, and as a matter of fact, these kids are so excited. I don't know how they get my name or how they get my email address, but I had to go back out to Firestone today because some students emailed me and said, hey, I went to Firestone and STEM today. I was supposed to be interviewed. You left me off. I wasn't able to have my interview.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I guess they're telling one another from student to student.
Mm-hmm.
So yes.
What a great thing. I mean, that shows their interest. I mean, if a student follows up like that, you're already gone and, hey, come back out here. I want to interview.
Right.
That's awesome.
Right.
That's good to hear.
And they're not your typical A student. We have a variety of students who are reaching out to me.
Nice.
So we know what they need. We just have to begin the process of engaging them and spreading that engagement out through our student body.
Okay. That's awesome. And then some of those students will be part of the mayor's leadership
Yes.
group? Okay.
About 80 of those students will go to the mayor's leadership team.
Okay.
I like that it's a variety of students too,
Yeah.
as far as even grades.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes, not to be dismissive of the kids who always excel, right? But it's nice to get a range of kids.
Yes.
Because they have something to offer as well, right?
Exactly. Like I can give you all two examples. The one young lady, or the young man, when you look at the partnership with the Akron Roundtable Luncheon, he was like, this is my first time ever being at a luncheon. I've never had this experience before. And he was just so excited to be there. And he told me, I want to do more of this. He was saying to me, am I allowed to get seconds? I'm like, absolutely. He goes, well, I'm going to wait until everybody gets served. I'm like, this is a luncheon. You don't have to wait until everyone is served. It's a buffet. You
That's
can
my
go
kind of
back
guy
up.
there to get the seconds. I like that. Yeah. I'm all about that.
Yeah, and as Ms. Autry can attest to the Akron community discussion, we had one young lady who talked about her connection with the ISS teacher because she spent some time there with him. The other young lady talked about being on an IEP and how that affected her and when she felt from those types of experiences. So we're just having a wealth of students. We also have a grant that came from GAR, and we started this work last year. We're going to continue it. One of the things that our students said is that we work better when we as students can help one another resolve our conflicts. So we have an organization coming in, I believe they're in Illinois, Wisconsin, and they're coming in. They did some peer mediation training with our high school students last year. They're going to come in November and do a refresher with our high school students so they can get that up and running. And then they're going to also work with our middle school students. We have 10 high school students from each high school. And from our middle schools, we're going to have 5 students. They'll be trained. We also train our staff. We train approximately 2 to 3 staff in each building. And then they need to go back and implement that in their schools so that they can have their peer mediation program. So we're hoping that this work, and we know that this work will spread out and give our students that sense of belonging. And hopefully we can see these transcend data numbers, these positive numbers tick up.
Wow.
Any additional questions that I can answer?
Mrs. Whitfield, so the peer mediation training, is it individualized at each building as far as how they actually implement it? Like once they're trained, does each building carry it out the same way, or is it a different way?
Well, it is standardized in a way because there's certain techniques that each building has to use, but how they implement it in their building is up to the culture of the school and how they want to do it. But each school should use those techniques because the techniques are research evidence-based techniques, and that this is what works. However, if one school says we want to do it in the morning, or we're going to do it over here, we're going to do it at lunch, they have that freedom to do it. Each school received a box. Each high school at this point has received a box of material, so they have all kinds of materials from CRU to help them implement in ways that work for their culture.
Unless board members sharing, if there are some things that you might suggest or would like to see us do more of that you think would be helpful in this work, we certainly want to hear from you too.
I'm just excited about all the things you guys have presented. I mean, especially the scholar voice piece. I mean, that's just huge to me because if our students are the ones who are coming forward and wanting to be a part of all this and wanting to be involved, I mean, that just raises the bar for me. That's what it's about in my eyes, for sure.
Yeah, and the work definitely aligns with DEI because when you really listen to what the students say, they don't say the word inclusive, but that is what they're saying, that they want to be included. So it definitely aligns with the work that Dr. Chapman is doing.
Yeah.
And it's a pleasure to work closely with her.
Yeah,
And it's like my colleagues were pointing out, I mean, it's one thing if everybody who's high achieving that's a part of it, but you got people who are not necessarily high achieving, but they have other skills they can bring to the table. It's not all about just the grades you get. So that's important, you know, people who have all different kinds of abilities and skills, you know, interviewing for these positions and being a part of the team is just huge for me.
Yeah, it really is. If there is one takeaway from our time at Columbia this past summer, it is that equity work is centered on the scholar, the student experience. And so we made a pact when we were there that, you know, we were going to link up arm in arm with Mrs. Whitfield to do more, to elevate scholar voice more, because our DEI framework includes environment. Being responsive to the environment that our young people are in, inside schools, inside classrooms, but we're not going to be responsive if we don't understand how they're experiencing school, how they're experiencing content, how their relationships with their teachers and administrators are. And so it's critical. It's critical to equity work.
I would agree. And if we're really truly serious, not only are we going to listen to these scholars, we're going to actually consider and implement some of these things that they're stating. And as adults, I know sometimes that's hard for us, but we have to be willing to do that. So along those same lines, I would hope moving forward at some point in time, when we hear from our student school board members, I would love to hear their opinion on one of the items on our agenda. We vote on all of these things, but I would like for them to maybe pick out an agenda item that, you know, resonates with them, that they have an opinion about, so that we can consider that as well. So I think that's just engaging them even more in what we're really doing, in addition to hearing their report out. So
Absolutely. And what's going to happen on October 23rd is you all can share some of that information with them, because we're having the Unity and Community reception, and you'll have time to meet your Scholar Board member and some of the members of Dr. Robinson's team. And you'll go through some brief leadership training with them that day, and we're going to be using the attendance of Unearthing Joy from Goldie Muhammad, so you all get to experience some of the things that we read about in the book. We're going to actually put them into practice, and you can tell the students some of the things that you want to hear from them, and you can hear some of the things that they want to hear from you all, because they have some very strong opinions.
Yes.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to reiterate, this data sheet that Mrs. Whitfield shared comes from an internal survey that we use in the district called Transcend. And so what she has chosen to share is what we call the LEAP. This Transcend survey data is 21st Century Equitable Learning LEAPs. And so the LEAP that she is sharing is connection and community. And those 3 questions that are highlighted there, give us metrics. Gives us the KPIs that we are always asking about, right? So it's not that we have to reinvent something to monitor. We have all the data that we need to monitor. I would like to see it put into a comprehensive equity data dashboard so that we're always going to the same place to look at and monitor what we are trying to improve upon. So that would be the purpose of the dashboard, is that of all the data that exists in our district that we monitor all the time, how are we looking at it through this whole equity framework to determine which pieces and parts we're moving with the work that we're doing.
And we have a lot of moving to do, because according to this,
Yeah.
of the 5,400 students who responded, fewer than half of them, in each of these questions answered yes. So I feel part of my community at school. There are a lot of people who know and care about me, only 48%. At my school, I feel included by other students, 46%. Overall, how much do you feel like you belong at your school? 42%.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to listen a lot more to what they have to say.
We have a lot of opportunity for improvement, yes. Yes.
Was there any follow-up with that survey? Would they answer those questions negatively like that? I mean, those are big numbers, as Valerie's already mentioned, but, was there follow-up? Why don't you feel included? What can we do to make you feel included? Those type questions.
So not on my part, but I think what would be good would be to have Larry Johnson, who is our Transcend survey kind of lead guru person, come to talk about how he's using the information in principal meetings, how it needs to also be addressed in our school plans. Mrs. Whitfield is obviously using it as part of her work in a way to measure even because you can drill it down to individuals.
Yeah.
So individual buildings. And so it gives us a lens to identify what we could be looking at, but he can be more specific in terms of how he works with schools on that particular area, because he can go through any of the leaps and just kind of say, this building is focused on this particular leap, another one on something else, but it is all based on the data. This would be all schools across the district, as you can see in that top left corner.
Yeah, I'd be curious, because I bet a lot of the things we can probably, solve. And my guess is, if a student doesn't feel like he or she belongs there, they're not going to learn it as well as they could otherwise. So I'd love to have Larry follow up and see if there's things we can actually do to fix why they don't feel comfortable there. I mean, that's a big part of it for me, for sure.
Well, and one of our 4 cornerstones is cultural and climate, right? Excellence in culture and climate. So this fits.
Yep. Culture of safety and belonging.
Yeah.
So, I will make note to see if we can get Mr. Johnson here for our next Equity Committee meeting.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else have anything to share?
Well, Mrs. Molnar and I sat in on a community conversation dialogue circle, part 2 of the community discussion. I didn't know if you had any just reflections.
So the part 1 was we listened to the student voices on Friday, and then part 2, we reflected on that. And what was special about that to me was there were also other community members there. And so it was even more perspective. One of the community members that was there had also heard the students. I think one of them hadn't, but it was just really, really, I think the most powerful part of it to me is it was very meaningful how engaged community members want to be. They want to be, they care, they have a vision for the future. Their vision for the future includes our students, it includes supporting our students, and I think everything we can do to continue to involve as many people as possible to continue this is wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. That is all on my part.
Anybody else? All righty, well then we will wrap up this meeting, and thank you all for being here.
Yep,
And
thanks for a great meeting.
see you next time.
Thank you.